Okay, so in this video, I want to continue on the theme of how we're able to be more productive in a shorter workday than we were when we were working a traditional 40-hour week, 8-hour day. So this applies for companies that are working a 4-day work week or maybe a compressed workday, like a 6-hour or in our extreme 5-hour workday. How are we more productive in 5 hours than we were when we were working 8 hours or more? And I've already shared this productivity pyramid before. And there's this phase one, which is the bottom of the pyramid. It's eliminate the biggest time wasters first. I want to get into a little bit more detail on phase one and also cover phase two, which is eliminate distractions and multitasking. And some companies, depending on who you are, can eliminate just as much, if not more, in that phase two, eliminating distractions and multitasking. Just depends on how many distractions you have and how much multitasking is going on within your organization. So I'm going to get into those in a little bit more detail. So first I want to talk about, from our perspective, why that first phase was so impactful. So we've talked about when you work a shorter work week or a shorter work day, it changes behavior. So it's kind of the trigger to get everybody to start working differently. Okay, we're working a shorter work week. We have to start really thinking about how we structure our day now. The first phase, and the reason it's the bottom of the pyramid, is because it represents the most amount of time that you can immediately free up. It's probably the easiest step. You don't need a real detailed time on it. You can just do a high level look at your calendar. Let's first talk about meetings. By the way, meetings, eliminating long coffee breaks, and eliminating long lunch breaks were the three biggest areas for us. It's going to be different for every individual and every company. So let's talk about meetings real quick. I don't want to get in a ton of detail around meetings because it's a huge, deep topic where we could just talk about meetings for hours. And I don't want to do that. I want this to be brief. I mean, I've got books on my shelf about optimizing meetings. It's a really big area. But just looking high level, we are spending 1 hour to 2 hours a day in meetings. Why is every meeting an hour long? A lot of our calendars default to an hour or 30 minutes or 15 minutes. I have 2 meetings a week typically that are 10 minutes. We don't follow those those defaults always. And then occasionally I'll have a 45-minute to an hour long meeting, but that might be that, one or two in a whole week, not in a day. So if we eliminate 2 1-hour meetings per day, that is a massive gain. And how are we able to do that, by the way? Because a lot of these meetings, everyone did not need to be in all these meetings. A lot of these meetings covered a lot of material that wasn't relevant to everyone in the meeting. We've retooled our meetings to have very clear agendas. We have objectives and things that we can prepare for before the meeting. So for instance, my 10-minute meetings that I have each week, I have material that I'm already bringing to that meeting with my work prepared beforehand so we can get right into it. The structure and the agenda is very clear. This isn't a let's catch up, let's spend a lot of time trying to fill this period of time. It's pretty brief. I mean, if we can get the meeting done in 5 minutes, we will. Sometimes that meeting is 5 minutes long, but it's very impactful because we're sharing information that's needed to move the needle on some work that's being done. That's the purpose for that meeting. So it depends on what you do. It's going to be different, but if you take a really good look at your meetings, I bet you could free up a ton of time there. Average American spends an enormous amount of time in meetings. It's crazy. When I graduated college, I was so excited about my first job in the corporate space. I went to my uncle. He was a CFO of a very successful company, and respected his advice. And his advice to me was avoid meetings at all costs. And I mean, I'm like, that's it? That's your advice for me? Avoid meetings? He's like, yeah, you'll find out pretty soon that the corporate space is basically one series of pointless meetings to the next. And he's like, in all honesty, I mean, some meetings are important, but, get used to declining meetings if they're not relevant to you, if they're not mandatory. So we completely retooled meetings. We saw huge gains in immediately freeing up time there. I mentioned shorter lunch breaks and shorter coffee breaks. We would come in at 8 o'clock, check email, maybe respond to some urgent emails, walk across the street to Starbucks. In the morning, the line is super long. And then we get our coffee, and then people are talking about stuff unrelated to work. We come into work, and by the time we actually get into our actual work and get into flow, it's 9 o'clock. So 30 minutes to an hour, conservatively, is wasted in a morning coffee break. Just eliminate that. Everybody, have your coffee before you get to work. It was an easy fix. And then we had, with a 5-hour workday, we just eliminated lunches altogether. I know everyone can't do that, but we get in really early. Blue Street usually gets out around 1 o'clock. Everybody takes a late lunch and they're done for the rest of the afternoon, assuming they've hit all their objectives for the day. Some people have to come back in the afternoon, depending on how busy they are, but you get the point. That frees up a lot of time. And that lunch break is always longer than you think. So when you're doing a time audit, even if you have to take a lunch break, most people do, it doesn't have to be as long. If you're commuting, you're coming back, you're talking about where you're going to go to lunch before you leave, you're talking about where you went when you get back. You're tired if you eat a huge lunch, you lose 30 minutes to an hour of kind of down energy where you're not real productive when you get back. So first, just take a real honest audit of how much time you're in the seat, out of the seat for lunch. And you can do that with all the breaks throughout the day. So just do a very basic high-level time audit to start. And it will illuminate which breaks are not helpful. Now, I'm not saying breaks are not important. Breaks are very important, but very short, intentional, restorative breaks. And that's a topic I'm going to get into in a whole nother video about ultradian rhythms and how we believe energy management is very, very important. Energy management is everything with the shorter work week. And one of the ways you manage your energy is through taking intentional breaks, but not breaks where you're going way off and blowing up your mind with stimuli through your cell phone, through conversations with other people that's unwork related. You end up getting way off track and hurting your productivity and hurting your flow through the day. So there is a methodology that I'll get into in another video. I'm talking about the biggest time wasters right now. It's going to be different for everyone, but that's where we freed up the most time. Next, I want to get into phase 2 of the productivity pyramid. So I think the middle section of the pyramid represents eliminating distractions and multitasking. And this is a huge topic, distractions. Huge topic. It's going to be different for everyone, but our number one and very close second biggest time wasters were employees interrupting people was probably the biggest, most disruptive thing. And the second was people's mobile devices, or you could just say electronic devices, technology it's designed to be addictive. Your mobile phone is designed to be addictive. So we had to really build protocols around that. So first, our CEO calls it got a minute meetings, where someone says, "Hey, Alex, you got a minute?" It's never a minute. Okay, so even if I was able to answer them in a minute, if I'm in the middle of a time block and I'm in flow and I'm really focused and I'm just cranking and they interrupt me and I'm able to answer them in a minute, it may take me 10 or 15 minutes to really get back on track, and I may never get back into flow where I'm really firing on all cylinders because my mind is subconsciously starting to think about all these different things I'm switching between. And if you get distracted all throughout the day, think of your mind as like opening up a whole bunch of browsers, as opposed to when you're time blocking and you're working on one task at a time, you have one browser open and you're working on that task really well, really productive. You can get in a 2-hour time block, you can get more done than some people do in a whole day. But if you're constantly being distracted, it's impossible. And you get diminishing returns throughout the day as more and more browsers open up, and it's like your computer getting slow. it works the same way with all distractions, but that one was the biggest for us. The mobile device works kind of the same way. You're constantly being split. Your attention's being split between the mobile device. The best thing to do is to have it turned off and out of sight, by the way. So there's a lot of studies that show that just by having the mobile device in sight, subconsciously splits your attention. So usually having the phone off and out of sight or on airplane mode and not visible will greatly improve your productivity. And then, just simple things like eliminating notifications, closing out your inbox. There's a lot you can do to eliminate distractions that are technology related. When we have this screen open, most people do work on a computer that has an internet browser, obviously. And it's just so easy for us to go into social media, check our fantasy football, Amazon cart, let me check that. These things will all of a sudden just explode into like 15, 30-minute or longer distractions. And they add up throughout the day too, to a lot more time than you think. You can do, just like you can do a time audit on how much time you're in the seat to figure out how much time you're wasting on lunch breaks, coffee breaks, things like that. You can also do a time audit on distractions. It's a little bit more tedious, but you can pull out a spreadsheet and break out your day within 15-minute chunks. I've done this a couple times, and I'm just logging every time I'm picking up my cell phone, every time I'm looking at social media or looking at something that's unwork related, and I'm just kind of logging how often am I actually getting distracted. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on multitasking. Some of the best studies have determined that about 28% of the day on average in companies is wasted in multitasking alone. And it's not so much that you're wasting time during the time that you're switching between tasks. It's also the attention residue is causing you to waste time because your mind is not, it's taking your mind longer to refocus and get back to actual work. Your mind, again, you can use that analogy with the browsers. You're opening up a bunch of browsers when you're trying to multitask. That's why you can't do multiple things really well. You can really only do one thing really well. Our brain is really good at doing one task really, really good. When you have multiple things done, your brain's just very quickly switching back and forth between those. And as the day goes on, that multitasking compounds, and that's where you really lose a lot of productivity. So the science is pretty unequivocal. Multitasking is detrimental to your productivity. So it's best to try to monotask. And I'll get into, I'm going to conclude this video, and then in another video, I'll also get into time blocking techniques that are really effective, because time blocking is the opposite of multitasking if you think about it. It's monotasking. It's doing one thing really well at one time versus multitasking, just spreading yourself everywhere and constantly switching. You can't expect to be real productive if you do that, and it would be really hard to work a shorter work week if you're working that way. So I hope these things were helpful. In other videos, I'm going to cover, the next topic's going to be really fun, covering phase 3 of the productivity pyramid, which is optimizing time blocks, optimizing meetings, and installing time blocks on the day.